So you're thinking about moving to Charleston, South Carolina, but are wondering, what is it really like to live there? What are the downsides and things that people wish they knew before they moved? Today, I'm sharing with you 10 facts that you need to know before you decide if Charleston is the right place for you. Now, to be clear, I absolutely love Charleston, and these facts have not discouraged me from living here for the last 10 years, and my goal isn't to discourage you either. I simply want to be honest and tell you the truth about what to expect, because nowhere is perfect and everyone has different preferences. That way, if you decide to move here, you are prepared and know exactly what you're getting into. If you want to be the first one to know about all things Charleston, South Carolina, go ahead and hit subscribe and tap the bell for notifications so that you can be the first one to know. Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm a realtor here, and I get calls, emails, and texts every day from people just like you who are looking to make their smooth move to Charleston. So if you are ready to buy or sell in the next 9 days or 9 days, please shoot me an email, a text, or a phone call, and I would absolutely love to help you make your smooth move to Charleston. The first fact you need to know is that it is extremely hot and humid here in the summers. So of course, a lot of people are drawn to the South because they are tired of the cold winters. In fact, I've helped a few clients just in the last couple of months moving here from places like New Jersey and Connecticut. And one of the main reasons they cited for their move was they were just simply tired of the snow, the blizzards, and all of the cold, long winters. So Charleston does have incredible weather a lot of the year. However, really June through September is just extremely hot and humid. I mean, it's kind of suffocating and very stagnant. You'll walk outside and you just feel like you're hitting this brick wall of humidity. It can be very insufferable, and if you're not used to it especially, then it can feel even more intense. Of course, we have air conditioning, so for a lot of people, they aren't outside all day long, but depending on your job or just depending on how much of a tolerance you have for the heat, even if you are just having to get in your car and go places or only be outside a little bit of the time, it's still a consideration. Sometimes here in the summer with the heat index, it gets over 100 degrees. So it's really darn hot. Not only is this a concern for your own personal comfort level and how you handle the heat personally, but when it comes to your home here, there are things that you have to keep in mind related to the humidity. So one of the things is termites. Termites love humid weather, which is why they are very prevalent in the South. Not too sure how prevalent they are up north or wherever you are watching this video from. Maybe it's not much of an issue, but termites are extremely common here in South Carolina. Termites are pests that basically eat away at the wood of your home. They are very destructive and can cause a ton of damage that is expensive to fix. So if you are moving here, then I would always recommend getting a CL100 when you are under contract for a home. Your realtor can explain this to you in more detail, but basically a pest company comes out and assesses the home. They tell you how much moisture levels there are and if they see any signs of pest damage, including termites, and then you can go from there if there's any type of damage or active infestation or any type of remediation that is needed. I would definitely recommend getting a termite bond as well. A termite bond, think of it like insurance for termites, basically. So you'll sign up for this contract with a pest company, and usually quarterly they'll come out to the house to check it out, and they'll do some kind of preventative treatment like traps or some kind of soil treatment, and that can help keep termites at bay. If any damage does happen after that, as long as you have the bond active, they will either cover the repairs or it will be discounted depending on what kind of policy you have. So a lot of homeowners insurance doesn't actually cover termite damage, which is why a termite bond is separate, and it's definitely something that I would recommend if you own property down here in Charleston. The other thing the humidity does is it creates a lot of moisture in the air, which of course isn't good for your house. Excessive moisture leads to things like mildew and mold is a very big issue down here, which I'm going to get to in the next point. The second fact you need to know about Charleston is the prevalence of allergies. Some of the most common ones are pollen and mold. So as I was just mentioning in the first point, it's very humid here, and that leads to mold. You need to keep your moisture levels in check. I would definitely recommend dehumidifiers in your homes. If you can afford a whole house dehumidifier, it's really the best way to ensure that your levels stay where they need to be. Excessive moisture and mold issues are very common here, particularly in attics and crawl spaces if the home is not on a slab, but rather on a crawl space. So again, this is something that you investigate if you are going under contract to buy a home. But if you are a homeowner, it's something that you need to keep tabs on to make sure that the humidity and to ensure it doesn't get out of whack. Mold not only causes issues in your home, but also for your health. Some people are very sensitive to it, others are not so sensitive. So it's really dependent on the person, but it can cause very extreme reactions in some people, lead to a lot of health issues and toxicity. So it's just something that you want to keep at bay. A lot of people here are also allergic to pollen. So the pollen here gets really bad in the spring. I'm not kidding when I say that you will walk out to your car one morning in the spring and your entire car and driveway will literally be coated in this thick blanket of yellow. It's pretty intense. I've never seen anything like it. Being from Virginia myself, even though we had pollen there, it was not to this degree. So some people who maybe weren't sensitive to pollen wherever they came from, but once they come to Charleston, it's in such high quantities that they've realized that they are allergic here and they do need to stock up on their over-the-counter meds like Allegra. Now the rain does come and wash it away. You'll see streams of yellow down your car and in the rainwater on the side of the roads, but then the flowers will bloom again when we get maybe some warmer temperatures, and it will happen all over again. And this is a cycle that lasts a number of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. It just depends on the seasonality, how warm it's getting, how quickly, and the fluctuation in temperatures. So really March, April, it's just something that you need to keep in mind. The third fact about Charleston is that we have a lot of bugs and critters. I've already mentioned termites. We also have a lot of mosquitoes. So especially stagnant water, if water's just sitting, mosquitoes are more likely. Also a big problem are gnats, or what we call no-see-ums, which you really don't see, but they're basically like a biting gnat, and they're just really obnoxious and kind of hurt when they bite you. I think the bugs get worse the further south you go. So if you aren't used to that from where you're from, it's just something that you are going to have to get used to, unfortunately. Of course, there's things you can do to mitigate it. So if you're outside, I have some natural bug spray that I like. Mission Essentials is a local company that makes a great bug spray. There's a brand called Natural Patch that are stickers. It's great for people of all ages, but especially for babies. They're actually baby safe and just a sticker that you can put on your kids to help with the mosquitoes. They actually work really well for my 1-year-old niece. My brother and sister-in-law said that when they started using it, it really reduced her mosquito bites down by over 90%. She was just getting eaten alive in their backyard, so the patches really helped. If you do get mosquito bites, a little tip I have to help with the itch is to put some lemon on it. Just a squeeze of fresh lemon. It seems to work every time. Another bug we have here that I just think is absolutely terrifying is called a palmetto bug, which is a fancy and less scary way of saying roach. I believe it's the American roach. They're these huge roaches, and it's not because your house is dirty, it's just because they thrive in the heat and humidity. So they're not quite as bad in the winter months, but come the springtime through the summer and fall, you will see these roaches more than you would like to. I just think they're really scary because they're fast and they fly, and they just really, really, really creep me out like nothing else. I will say that for our home, we got a DIY bug spray. It's a company called Pesty, and we sprayed it around the outside of our home a couple of months ago, and I have not seen a single palmetto bug since. We also had some ants coming in the back door, and those are gone now, so I'd highly recommend Pesty if you are okay with doing your own application. Of course, there are local companies as well that you can hire to come out quarterly, and they can spray outside and inside your home if you'd like, and that can really help with the bug management. As far as other critters go, we kind of famously have alligators here. I just got an email from somebody who was thinking about moving here, specific neighborhood, and she said, "Do you think there's alligators here?" And the truth is, there can really be alligators almost anywhere in the area as long as you are close to water. Alligators live in the water. Oftentimes they will have one main hub, like one pond that is their home. They're territorial, so if they are the alpha, then they've probably fought another alligator for that pond, and then that's the pond that they most frequent. However, they are mobile. They can move and be out on the streets or in someone's backyard. My parents in Mount Pleasant live on the Wando River, and there was an alligator in their neighbor's front yard just a couple of weeks ago. So it is something to be mindful of, but I would say that it's honestly not that big of a deal. I know that might sound crazy, but alligators really leave you alone as long as you don't mess with them. So if you're moving here from somewhere else, you're probably just terrified of alligators and don't understand how anyone could live anywhere near where an alligator lives. But I promise you that as long as you just stick to yourself and you don't provoke it or, get into the water where the alligators live, then it's by and large 99.99% of the time nothing that you have to worry about. I would say though, if you have small dogs or cats that you let outside, I would definitely not do that if you live by a pond that an alligator lives in. Keep your dogs on a leash, keep them close to you, and then you can ensure that you keep them out of harm's way. And finally, on the critters list, we have snakes. A lot of the snakes aren't poisonous, but a few are. We do have some copperheads in the area. My boyfriend has seen them out on Johns Island and in West Ashley. My parents, again, saw the one, or their neighbors saw one in their neighborhood in Mount Pleasant. So, of course, that is a scary thing. Just be very aware if you're doing gardening or out in your yard that sometimes the snakes can pass by. The majority of the time it's just a garden snake, it's not harmful, but every once in a while it could potentially be a poisonous snake. I think there's poisonous snakes in a lot of parts of the country, right? There's different varieties up north or out west, like rattlesnakes. So this isn't particular to Charleston, but it is something that you have to be aware of when you live here. The fourth fact you need to know about Charleston is the hurricanes and flooding. So we are obviously in Hurricane Alley, which really goes up the East Coast. The last bad hurricane we had here was Hurricane Hugo in 1989. It was a Category 5 and it devastated a lot of Charleston. So that was very sad. There was a lot of rebuilding after that time, and since then we've just had more minor hurricanes like tropical storms and Category 1s and 2s. So some people could say that maybe Charleston is due to get hit, but you could also argue that since it's been a solid 30 plus years since a really bad Category 5 hurricane has come through, that maybe we're just not as likely as some other parts of the country like Florida to get hit by a really terrible hurricane. You of course just never know. It's a risk that you have to be willing to take when you move here. Hurricane season is actually half of the year. It's 6 months long. It starts in June and goes through November. However, the worst hurricanes are typically August, September, and October, so it's about 3 months of the year that you really have to be the most aware. I would always recommend having a plan, having supplies at the house, things that you can do to board your windows or put down sandbags if it's going to be a really bad hurricane, and then having a plan to leave town if you need to. We are right at sea level here, so even if it's not a hurricane, sometimes we do get flooding here just through normal thunderstorms or heavy rains passing through. There's not the best irrigation. This is really the biggest problem in downtown Charleston. The roads just flood there in a hot minute. So if you are buying downtown, it's definitely something that you need to know about. And then for other parts of Charleston, it's just going to depend where you are in terms of how close you are to the water, what specific lot are you on? How does it slope? Is it elevated? Of course, if your home is elevated, which a good amount of homes here are, your home has a much smaller risk of flooding. Really, all of Charleston is a floodplain. The lowest flood zone you can be in is called an X flood zone. That is the most minimal risk of flooding that you have, and it does not require flood insurance if you are getting a mortgage out on a home. So if this is a big concern to you, then I would definitely recommend that you only look at homes in X flood zones. Now, because there has been a lot of flooding and hurricanes these last few years on the East Coast at large, the cost of homeowners and flood insurance has significantly gone up. Starting in 2023, some people said that their insurance actually doubled, which is just crazy. We had a lot of carriers pull out of South Carolina, so it is a troublesome spot right now where a lot of insurance companies just don't want to cover South Carolina or anywhere that's hurricane prone because they are thinking it is too risky. So if you are wanting to buy a home here, I would definitely get some quotes on both homeowners insurance and flood insurance before you go under contract so you understand what that cost is going to be. Now, some flood insurance really isn't that expensive. It can be as low as, I believe, $500, $600 a year. So all things considered, it's really not a huge sum of money. Of course, depending on your flood zone, depending on all of the variables I mentioned earlier. Obviously, if you're oceanfront on an island, it's going to be very substantial. You're going to be in the highest flood zone. So there's just a lot of factors that go into determining how much your specific flood insurance is going to be. Now, as I said, we are right at sea level, which means we actually don't have mountains or really hills in our area. So if you love hiking and mountain air and you love that kind of elevation, we just simply don't have it in the Charleston area. But the good news is that we have it just about a 3-hour drive away. If you go out to Greenville, South Carolina, which is beautiful, you are right there on the edge of the mountains. You can go up to North Carolina, Tennessee, and you can get your fix. I also wanted to mention, and I don't know what category this falls into, so I'm just going to say it here, that we don't have basements in Charleston. Because this is a marshy area that is a floodplain, it just wouldn't make sense to dig up the ground, and it's just too wet that you really can't get the basement structures here. I grew up with a basement in Virginia. It was a part of my home that we used a lot for games and a play area. We had an extra bedroom down there, an extra bathroom, even though my entire family thought it was haunted, which is a story for another day. We still spent a good amount of time down there. So some people that are from other parts of the country come here asking for a basement, and you're not going to find a basement anywhere. It doesn't make sense given that we live on the marshland. It's called the Low Country after all for a reason, and especially with all of the flooding and hurricane risk, that would just be a bad combination. Instead, what a lot of people have is something called a frog. It stands for finished room over the garage, and it's just this extra space. It's very flexible. Some people use it for an office, some people use it as a rec room for the kids, a play area. There's a lot of things you can do with it. Sometimes it is an extra bedroom or bathroom, but it does add square footage to your home, and it gives you some spillover from the rest of your house. So you can definitely look for frogs, and not the green kind, when you are looking in Charleston for your next home. The fifth fact you need to know about Charleston is that it is a touristy town. For 11 years in a row, Charleston has been named the #1 city as voted on by the readers of Travel and Leisure magazine. Food and Wine magazine has also named Charleston as the 7th best city for food and the 5th best city for neighborhood restaurants in the entire country. And those are just a few of Charleston's accolades. So given that it is constantly ranking in all of these lists, as well as just being a historic site, it is one of the original colonies, and we have a ton of history here. It just tends to attract a ton of tourists, as well as the beach areas. People love to vacation at the beach. We've got a lot of them. So between the history, the downtown culture, and the beaches, we have tourists most of the year here. Of Of course, it's going to be the worst in downtown historic Charleston, so if you are driving down there, please be extra aware and cautious because tourists, whether they're walking or driving, they don't know where they're going. They could walk right out in front of your car, and the roads are very, very narrow in certain parts of downtown, and there's also a lot of one-way streets, so just please be extra cautious and go slow when you're driving downtown. Now, I'm not saying that all tourists are bad or anything like that. Please don't take offense to this because tourism is great for our local economy. It really brings in a lot of extra tax money and fuels local businesses and has a lot of great perks to it that help us be able to reinvest back into the local infrastructure and a lot of the local initiatives. But of course, it does make the town more crowded. There's going to be longer lines for certain attractions and for restaurants, and just more traffic and congestion overall. So if that's something that you don't like to be a part of, then maybe this isn't the best area for you, or at least not in the main tourist spots. The traffic going onto and off of the beaches at prime time is also pretty brutal. A lot of the days that goes for Folly Beach, Isle of Palms, and Sullivan's Island. It might take you an hour just to go a few miles and get over the bridge and find a parking spot. So what I've learned is to go in off times. Sometimes I'll get up and go really early and be at the beach by 9 a.m., which hasn't been a problem. Most people aren't trying to get to the beach quite that early. Or you can go much later in the day, maybe for a walk around sunset. A lot of times the traffic has cleared up by then. People are leaving to go to dinner, get the kids ready for bed. So if you have the flexibility to go later in the day, that's usually the way to do it. The sixth fact about Charleston you need to know is that it is growing, and there are actually no signs of it slowing down anytime soon. As I just mentioned, we have the tourism, but even outside of that, this is still a very desirable place for people to live, and people are still moving here every single day. So things are getting more crowded, and some people have shared that they believe Charleston is already overbuilt, and it's just continuing to get more and more built out. So yes, Charleston doesn't look like what it looked like 30 years ago, but I don't think there's very many places in the country that look like they did 30 years ago. Most places have changed. The population is growing and people need a place to live. They have to go somewhere. So times change, places change. I still think Charleston is an awesome place compared to where I'm from in the Washington, D.C., Virginia area. It is very crowded up there. I still don't think Charleston is as bad, but it's all relative. Considering the amount of land we have here and the amount of people, yes, it is a bit congested, and especially if you're talking about traffic at rush hour and depending on your commute, it definitely can be bad on certain days. It's still nothing compared to DC or LA or New York, but it certainly has its moments. Now, more times than I can count, I've seen in some local Facebook groups where someone who is excited about moving here posts something about, oh, we're moving to Charleston, and what do you think about areas or schools or this or that, trying to just get some local input. And I can't believe how mean people are in the comments sometimes. People just say, we're full, go home, and don't come here. And I just think it's really inconsiderate and rude and mean to talk to people like that. I think it's important to share the pros and the cons and to be honest, but you shouldn't just flat out tell people not to come here and be rude like that. So if that's happened to you, just ignore it. There's going to be rude people everywhere. If you want to move here, and the list so far of the facts of Charleston hasn't discouraged you, then move to Charleston and you're probably going to love it. This actually brings me to my next point, number 7, which is that Charleston is in the South. The state's motto is actually smiling faces, beautiful places, and that seems really fitting for South Carolina. It's known to be a very friendly city. Hospitality is truly part of the culture here, and true to Southern culture, a lot of people are very polite and respectful. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And I think that's part of the charm. Now, we have had a lot of people move here from all over the country, especially in recent years, so this is starting to change a little bit. So though I think Charleston is a friendly city, if you're from New York City or Boston or somewhere where maybe you're more used to the the hustle and bustle and being super blunt and saying it like it is and just having more of that kind of mentality, then Charleston might not quite be the best fit for you if you just have no filter. On that note of this being the South, the 8th fact about Charleston is that we are a red state here in South Carolina. Now, I am not going to get political in this video. That is not the purpose of it. I'm not going to share my personal opinions. I just want to mention this because maybe you're super excited about that and that's why you're moving here. Or maybe you're super liberal and a big Democrat and you just can't imagine living in a red state. We have a Republican governor and 2/3 of the state is more rural, which almost always tends to lean itself towards more conservative. Now here locally in the Tri-County Charleston area, it is more of a mix. It's almost 50-50 split between Republican and Democrat, so this is more of a melting pot area. So just know if politics is super high on your values list, what you're getting into. A lot of people actually have moved here from out west or up north after COVID because they weren't happy with how things were managed in their states, and that's actually why they moved here, was to get away from that. Of course, we also have diehard Democrats in South Carolina and in Charleston too. So again, you just need to weigh this fact against your own personal priorities and what matters to you. The 9th fact about Charleston is the high cost of living. The home prices here are steadily rising. They've gone up about 30% or so in just the last 3 years, which is a staggering number. The latest median sales price in Charleston County is $606,628 for a home. That is actually over 200% of our area's median income. So obviously the wages here haven't kept up with the home price appreciation. The wages are not in line for the average person to really be able to afford Charleston, which is really sad and not how things should be. A lot of workers who are in hospitality, retail, even first responders like firefighters, for example, do not get paid well here in South Carolina. They typically can't live in the areas that they work. They have to commute because they can't afford to live in a lot of these pricier suburbs. Affordability is definitely a big issue here, and it really is just going to depend on what kind of line of work you're in, how the wages stack up to other parts of the country, or what you're used to. A lot of people retire down here in South Carolina, and at that point they're not needing the wages. They aren't working anymore, so at this point in their life it just makes sense for them to come move south. But if you do have a job, definitely going to need to look at how things stack up in Charleston. I have a whole video about the cost of living in Charleston, so if you want to know more about not just home prices, but all other costs of living as well, go ahead and check that out after this video. All right, we're on to our 10th fact about Charleston, which is the lack of infrastructure. There is not a lot of great public transportation here. We do have a bus system called CARTA, but it's not super extensive, and it's nothing compared to major cities if you're used to a great public transportation system. Now, they are working on a new mass transport system that is possibly going to be ready about 2030 or so. So we'll see how that helps. That's obviously still about 7 years or more away, and we'll just have to see when the time comes how much that helps alleviate and really solves this problem. Charleston also isn't super walkable unless you're downtown. So downtown is actually extremely walkable. It scores a 99 out of 100 in walkability, which is amazing, but most other parts of Charleston are not super walkable. There's not always sidewalks or even bike lanes. So if you're used to biking everywhere, biking isn't that safe in all parts of Charleston. Now, of course, there are some micro sections and neighborhoods of Charleston that are more walkable to things like restaurants and retail. So in Mount Pleasant, you have certain parts of Park West or the Old Village in Mount Pleasant, or even Ion in Mount Pleasant. These neighborhoods are more within walking distance to somewhere you can grab a bite to eat or have a drink. You also have Park Circle in North Charleston, which is super popular and has a ton of restaurants right there on the main strip. You have Nexton up in Somerville, Nexton Square. So if you live in the Nexton area, then there are a lot of trails that bring you into Nexton Square. So there are certainly pockets within Charleston where you can find some walkability. On James Island, we have Riverland Terrace, but just know the majority of the neighborhoods that you will probably be looking at are not going to be super walkable to these amenities. Our schools here also vary as far as how well they are ranked, so that's something you need to do your own due diligence on and see what part of town and what kind of school, whether it's public or private, that you feel most comfortable sending your child to. There you have it. There's our 10 facts of what you need to know before moving to Charleston, South Carolina. Leave a comment below and let me know which one of these surprised you the most. Do you still think you would enjoy living here? Or if you do already live here, do you relate to these? Is there anything I missed? I'd love to hear from you. If you found this video helpful, please tap subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. I also have some other videos that you may find helpful. For example, the pros and cons of Charleston and the pros and cons of certain suburbs like Mount Pleasant and James Island. So check out those videos next if you're looking to move to the area and trying to figure out which part of town is best for you, or check out the best suburbs in Charleston, South Carolina. Again, my contact information is pinned below, so if you would like any support with buying or selling real estate here in the area, I would absolutely love to help, so please reach out. And until then, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.